As we leave the summer of 2025 behind and step into October, we enter a month that is bold, unapologetic, and powerful. Black History Month in Britain. A time to honor struggle and triumph, to celebrate the contributions of the Black community, and to confront the realities of poverty that persist even to this day. For me, the Black community has been a teacher, from music to resilience on the streets, from resistance against racism and oppression to lessons in survival and indebtedness. These influences run deep into my own personal journey. Welcome to Debt Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Ripon Ray. This episode, Poverty and Black History in Britain. To guide us through this month's conversation, I'm joined by Jerry During, founder of Money A&E, the UK's first Black and lived experience-led debt advice and financial education service. Born in Newham, East London, Jerry built Money A&E out of frontline realities of poverty, debt, and resilience. And finally, Helen Barnard, Director of Policy and Research at the Trussell Trust, an organization working to end the need for food banks, serving communities across the UK and shining a light on the links between poverty, race, and inequality. We're here to mark Black History Month through the lens of poverty and debt because Debt Talk is about exposing realities, sharing stories, and amplifying voices that are too often silenced. Jerry, welcome back to Debt Talk. Your childhood, no doubt, shapes your destiny. Some are born with silver spoons, others with none at all. Where do you fit in, and how did that shape the person you are today?
Yeah, I might have had a silver spoon. I don't know if it was pure silver. It might have been copper with I don't know, silver paint on the top. But I think as a child you don't really realise this. I grew up in Newham, which is one of the most diverse, multicultural places in the country, and you don't really look at those things as a child. You don't really realise them. I don't think. But you do kind of remember conversations you may have had with your friends, your childhood friends playing around, and those aspirations of getting out, going somewhere beyond, where the bus 15 ends, or something like that. It would be like, talking about wanting to become a musician or a footballer or something like that. So I do remember a lot of those sorts of conversations. But yeah, like I said, the most multicultural. There's lots of Asians, lots of people from the African continent. There's lots of people from European countries. From almost all corners of the world, you'd find people in Newham. So you don't really realise that much about that, but looking back, you realise it is one of the poorest boroughs in the country. When you look at it, there are improvements and things happening now, but it has been at the bottom of that table, certainly in London, but also across the country, is one of the most deprived areas. And when I was a young boy in school, and this is a real story of deprivation. I mean, my dad basically he lost his job, he got really depressed, and he was really suffering in a really bad place. And that was my first real encounter with money and deprivation issues. And I realized the impact it had on me and my family, my mum, that my dad and my mum were going to break up, lots of arguments in the house. We're also told not to open the door, because if you open the door, someone might come. And that was my introduction to what bailiffs are. They come and they take stuff from your house and take it away. And I could hear my parents arguing about stuff like us being evicted and chucked out because the mortgage wouldn't be paid. And this all happened because my dad was redundant, but he got help. He was able to, at the end of it, get out of that situation. And I think when I look back on that, that for me was a real kind of understanding of what deprivation is and where I actually came from. And it's one of the pivotal things. My dad was really the person, and the way that he dealt with his debt is something that I use today in the work that we do in communities as well, through advice and education as well. So he was able to kind of turn that situation around and get lots of support. And
To what extent race played a part in you growing up?
Newham is so multicultural. It's like the United Colours of Benetton there. So you can basically turn around and race isn't really an issue. But I think the first time it became an issue for me was when I was doing sort of legal training, basically, to become some kind of a lawyer, whether it was a barrister or solicitor or something like that. And when I used to talk to lots of my friends, some of my, you begin to meet people who are from further parts of the country or from London, and some of my kind of white friends and colleagues, I realised that loads of them already had jobs before we were studying. And I'd be sending out like hundreds of applications and like maybe getting one interview. And I'm like, what's going on here? That's something that seems a bit odd, isn't it? And then when you'd actually get to the interview, if it was like a big city firm, I'd basically be sitting in the reception area and looking around, and the only people that I'd see that would be the same colour as me would probably be the cleaners passing by, or maybe the receptionist if we were lucky. So those were the kind of experiences that I've begun to think something's a bit different here. Am I like, is there something wrong with me? Am I white? Am I really welcome here? So I think that's when I first began to get a real kind of sense of what not being white was and how different I was.
You mentioned about obviously your personal experience with your dad and struggling financially on the verge of bankruptcy and bailiffs knocking on the door. What first drew you into the debt advice sector? How did that happen?
I mentioned sort of legal training. So a lot of the jobs I was applying for were the big city firms, the magic circles and that. Not really having that much success and joy there. So I was doing more with sort of legal aid firms and the high street firms. And I worked in a few of those and begun to, you did a bit of immigration, a bit of family, a bit of debt, a bit of employment. You did a bit of everything. And I was working under legal aid contracts at the time, which was, you could give free advice to people in these sorts of areas. And then I also did a stint at the Citizens Advice Bureau as well, and they do a lot of different areas as well. So it was really good to kind of be able to help people in these different ways, one by one, and being able to get these results for people, whether it was them able to get their immigration status and stay in the UK, the land of where the streets are paved with gold, and money drops off the trees. So it was really great for them to be here. And then also, with employment, being able to get people compensation a lot of the time, some financial redress would be really, really helpful for them. Debt was another area that I kind of just almost accidentally fell into it by doing some cases for people who came in with debt alongside other issues. And again, realizing, where you could challenge debt or you could help someone get a result where they were paying off their debt, but they were less stressed about it, when they had a financial situation that wasn't their fault. So, that was really good. And I started to get a really good feeling about it. But I think after a while, I was like, okay, it's great helping someone one by one, but how can we help more people like this? And I think that also brought me back to my dad's story as well, and realizing that's really good. And I started to see that there are these kind of patterns. People are coming in with the same issues. Why is that? And is there something beyond just, it can't be that so many people having this. Is this just a coincidence, or is there something bigger going on here? And it started to get me to really look at structures and systems and policies and laws and how things are shaped and skewed, really, to really help us understand, why these coincidences are happening to the same sorts of people as well. Money and debt fits into so many different areas, and poverty affects people in so many different ways. And I think, apart from doing that one by one, I wanted to do a little bit more. And I realized that debt and money is one of the ways that you can really see so many different issues.
So at what point did you say enough is enough and I need to build my own solution, i.e. own organization?
So after going from the law firms to the CAB, I then ended up at a place called Toynbee Hall. I was brought in there because they had a brand new debt advice service that they wanted to try and deliver debt advice and make it more accessible to people because debt wasn't free. And that's where I met you actually, Ripon, as well. I think you worked there as well, didn't you? But yeah, it was there that I kind of realized this is a really great project. We're able to help so many people in the area of East London. I helped shape this service, and we were helping quite a few people. So it's more than just that one person. Now we had a team helping a few people. So that was really brilliant. Um, but as the years progressed, it kind of what I realized was we were helping people en masse, and I think that was the point of it. But what that also meant is that the system was structured in a way that it became more of a tick box exercise, almost like a conveyor belt of how many people can you see and do something for them and then send them on their way. And what I realized was that that doesn't help many of the people who are in my community, people who need more help, people who are more vulnerable and need actually a little bit more support. And it was kind of then when these sorts of changes were coming in that I realized actually, you know what? This isn't really helping people. This isn't what I set out to do. So it was there. I also met Greg there, who is another black guy from Newham, East London. And we both thought, we both had our own experiences of debt, in our own lives. And we looked at our peers and realized a lot of them weren't coming in the doors and getting the support that they needed. And we saw a lot of vulnerable people who were not coming in the doors and getting the support that they needed. So we decided what we want to do is try and create something else that brings those people in, but is really made for them. And the only way we could do that was by listening to them and hearing how can we reach them. So different places that I'd worked, Toynbee Hall, CAB, doing a great job, local authority, debt advice and social welfare law agencies, doing a great job. But this kind of tick box conveyor belt system meant that a lot of people were not getting the support they needed. So we wanted to go and reach people where they were. And that's when Money A&E started, really. And we started trying to deliver services that reach people where they are, help them, and is shaped by them. That's when enough was enough and what we decided to do about it.
So as a black leader in the debt sector, what challenges did you face engaging with councils and governments? And do they truly listen to you and your community?
It was hard, but I think they are listening now. I think we've been around for a while and we're getting, people in the public sector and the private sector who are really listening and realizing that what we're doing actually does work. And also, for them, a lot of the time, it's about really demonstrating that there is a win-win solution. Often, by supporting people who are in debt, it doesn't always have to be win-lose. It can be a situation where everyone is winning. And I think the more we actually listen to those who are affected by the problems, who've got lived experience, and we really ingrain them in the process of designing solutions that address those problems, and where possible get them implemented in delivering some of those solutions, you see the best results. And like I say, they're win-win results for everyone. It's just about listening and working out how to do it. And I think that means that you're getting more people listening. So we are having more people who are, in government, who are from industry and business, who are from grant funders. They're listening because they see that what we do works.
Black men are nearly 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. Why do you think that is, and what must change?
It harks back to a historical kind of structure and system. There are legacies within that system that are here now and today, basically. We didn't make them today, but we have the power to change them. But there are legacies from empire, there are legacies from the slave trade, there are legacies from so many different things that are still apparent in our economic and financial system today. And there are ways that we can kind of change that. But those sorts of challenges mean that lots of black people are basically growing up in places where they have been excluded and where they are affected negatively. There is real harm, both physical, mental, financial stress, economic stress, and they're outside of the system, and the system is hostile to them. So often they are seen outside of the system, they are labelled a certain way, and they are treated a certain way as well. And I'm not saying that it's anyone's intention today, but these are systems that we have to start to really shine a light on. We need to open up by listening to lived experience and the impacts of it and what's happening. We need to understand the legacies and how those structures that were made in the past are affecting us today. And often that's why we're seeing that lots of diverse ethnic communities, black men are in prison, are in mental health institutions, are excluded from the systems that will help us all do a lot better. I refuse to believe that just because of the color of my skin, that makes me better, worse off, or it makes me a criminal, an evil person. It makes me someone who's, got less mental health or resilience about them. There is something else here, and we need to look at these things in a different way and create different approaches to it. So yeah, the mental health system is a massive system where there's a lack of understanding of culture, and there are also lots of damages that are done by the system to people, especially living in poverty as well, and outside of that system, that has an impact on them.
And finally, Jerry, with the rise of extremism in recent years, how does that resonate with your own experience, and what should we as a society do about it?
At the moment, it's been used as a bit of a political football. There's a lot of issues that are happening that are linked to poverty, where we're whipping up a lot of the anger that people are feeling against this system and trying to put that onto migrants and trying to other people in a way, and it's leading to things. We're seeing lots of these riots and all this stuff going on at the hotels. I live in Epping Forest, and all of that kind of crap that's going on out there. It's all people using these kind of false narratives, right? And they're looking at the wrong things and placing the blame in the wrong place, instead of looking at the systems and the circumstances that we're in, and looking at real ways that we can repair these situations. We're doing a bit of work called the Equity and Finance Project, where we're looking at lived experience, and that means listening to those who are really truly affected, looking at their histories, and trying to find and get them involved in solutions and co-creating those solutions with the public sector, the industry as well, and trying to find the right solutions. But writing outside hotels because people are fleeing countries where they're facing, death potentially, or they're being put into different forms of, gangs or prostitution rings and being forced into slavery. A lot of people are in really dire situations, and there isn't an understanding of what is actually going on, and then there's this false narrative about how that is impacting other people in their daily lives, when those probably aren't really the true issues. But it's a political football often used to whip up this kind of hate.
Thank you, Jerry. Now, Helen, thank you for joining us. Now, we've spoken about extremism. Why do you think extremist politics capture the headlines whilst the rooted cause of poverty, particularly for Black and minority communities, remain sidelined?
There's two things I think that are happening with this. So I think one is that if you look at the last probably 10, 15 years, we've had this really long period where the economy has been stagnating, where people's incomes have been either flatlining or dropping, particularly for people on lower incomes, where there's been massive cuts to public services, and so the public realm has been eroded. So I think that sense that we are in this long period where life has been getting worse in lots of different ways for a lot of people. And I think that has, so obviously it is people who are already at the bottom who have had the worst hit, but even people in the middle who are not experiencing the kind of poverty we're going to talk about, but are feeling squeezed. So you have this long period, and I think there is a sense that mainstream political parties have not been offering solutions. People are frustrated, they feel trapped, Luke Trill from More in Common talks about, you've kind of got the rise of, you've got people who are still saying incremental changes to our systems can make things better, and people who increasingly, since the Brexit referendum, are saying things are so bad, we should just smash it all up and try, we'll start again. So you've got that, I think. And then what you've then got is the rise of populist movements, and that kind of both on left and right, actually. And kind of the essence of populism is offering simple solutions to complicated problems and identifying enemies. So, as Jerry was saying, you've got on some of the far right populists, they're identifying enemies as people who are migrants or from ethnic minority groups. On the left, what you tend to see is enemies are, there's a small cabal of wealthy people, and you can solve all our problems if you just tax them a bit more, which I think is not, doesn't bring the kind of violence you see from the far right, but is also not a genuine answer. And then you've got the rise of new media, which massively amplifies extremist, populist views. The kind of what gets clicks is simple, angry people basically saying, this is really bad and it's really simple and I've got the answer and it's that person over there who's to blame. That's what gets amplified. A kind of nuanced discussion about how you can improve the housing market does not generally get you clicks. So I think that, for me, that's what I think has been leading to the rise of this.
The subject matter is race-related. Are we actually moving forward or backward when it comes to racial equality?
I mean, I think it's interesting. So you'll know that this week at Trussell, we've published our big flagship research into hunger in the UK. So it's a really large-scale research with the general population in the UK, with a big enough sample we can look at what's happening for different groups, and also big survey of people who've been referred to Trussell food banks. One of the findings that really jumped out at me is that people from ethnic minority or racialized communities are nearly twice as likely to have experienced food insecurity, so to have faced hunger because they haven't got enough money for essentials, compared to white people. So you've got a quarter of people from ethnic minority groups have faced hunger, compared to 14% of white people. We've also seen that people from ethnic minority groups are far more likely to have had to turn to a food bank or a charitable food provider for support compared to white people. I think that is an incredibly stark kind of statement about the kind of the way in which inequality is playing out in really devastating ways in people's lives. If you've got this incredibly high risk of people literally not being able to put food on the table and pay the bills, that is just incredibly worrying.
You mentioned about not being able to pay for food. What is the cause? What's the underlying cause for such a problem within this community?
So I think there are probably two big reasons why I think we are seeing this much higher risk for people from a lot of ethnic minority backgrounds. So one is that when you look at what's happening in the labour market, people from a lot of ethnic minority groups are still far more likely to be in low-paid work, to be in insecure work, to be in work that does not give you a reliable income that will help you pay for your living costs. You also have obviously higher unemployment, particularly for young people from ethnic minority groups. So you see every time there is a recession or a financial crisis, it tends to be young black people who are hit the hardest, who take the biggest hit on not being able to get work, not being able to keep work. So you've got that. So actually getting enough income from work is so much harder for people from a lot of ethnic minority groups. On the other side, housing, it's the biggest cost for most of us. And there's been some research the Resolution Foundation did, and what they were seeing was that from some people from some ethnic minority groups are paying much higher housing costs. So what they found was that if you look at Bangladeshi, Black Other and Arab groups, they are spending more than twice as much of their income on housing compared to white British adults. And it's worth saying that's not because they're getting better housing. Those groups are also more likely to be in overcrowded housing, damp housing, so they're paying more for worse living conditions. And that's partly because people are renting. So, if you are in the private rented sector, people will know out there you're often facing high rents and insecure homes. And it is much harder for people from some of the ethnic minority groups to build up savings to get on into home ownership, because people are on low incomes and they aren't, they're being shut out of steady, good jobs. So you've got those things happening. And then that brings you to the big thing in the middle, which is the social security system is the biggest driver of hunger in this country for everyone, regardless of your race or background. If you are having to rely on the social security system because you're disabled or you're out of work or you're a carer or you're on low pay, you are highly likely to find yourself without enough money for essentials. So people on universal credit, more than half of them facing hunger because the social security system is just not doing its job. So you've got that kind of this kind of confluence of these issues, which adds up to these incredibly high risks of people just facing really severe long-term poverty.
Jerry spoke about working together in many ways to meet the need of the community. In your view, what does true collaboration look like in the UK when it comes to tackling poverty and building fairness?
I love what Jerry was saying about working with people who have direct experience of the issues. And that's something at Trussell that we've been really trying to do more and more over the last few years. So we're trying to do both our research and policy work in partnership with people who have direct experience of hunger, of needing a food bank. We are trying to design social security solutions with people who have been in that system and know what the problems are. And then many of our food banks at a local level, lots of them have again been really working on trying to kind of build the food bank and design services with people, and also campaigning with people. I mean, one of the biggest changes I've seen over the last few years, I think, as a campaigner, is the way in which the voice of people with lived experience has become more and more amplified in that campaigning space. And that is so powerful, I think, for two reasons. One is because people who have direct experience bring expertise, which you don't have if you haven't had that direct experience. Universal credit is such a good example. When it was being designed, you can tell there was nobody with lived experience in that room because of things like paying a month in arrears, saying we're going to pay a month in arrears, and saying that that's because people get paid monthly and therefore it should fit. Now, actually, if you had either had researchers or people with lived experience, they would have said, hang on a minute, most of us get paid weekly or bi-weekly or just kind of as it comes. And we don't have the savings to survive for a month. So there are things like that, which, kind of a perspective on how something will work, which is not informed by lived experience, got baked into that system and has been causing problems ever since. So I think in terms of the genuine getting the right solutions, you need that expertise, but also the power. So when I'm speaking at events or on the media or I'm speaking to politicians, if you have people in that conversation who can say, in my experience and the experience of people around me, because it's not just me as an individual, it is much, much harder for people to dismiss what you're saying. So I can give some stats and I can give some research, and that's useful. But if I am also there with a lived experience expert that we're partnering with, it is much harder for the person we're trying to persuade to simply dismiss it because you're looking someone in the face. And I think so the expertise and the kind of moral authority people have is so powerful.
Thank you so much to both of our guests, Jerry During and Helen Barnard. To our listeners, if you want to share your experience, get in touch with me at ripon@debttalk.org. But before we finish, I want to ask each of my panel members to give us top tips for our listeners on how we can resolve poverty in the context of Black history in Britain. Let me start with Jerry.
I think for individuals out there, there's probably messages here for two audiences, and one is the decision makers, the institutions, and the other is for individuals. So I'll start off with individuals, and if you are basically feeling isolated, alone, embarrassed, mentally stressed and anxious about money, and you're in a dark tunnel and there's just no way out, I would say that it's really important for you to reach out to an advice agency that can support you. You can check out on the internet, there'll be lots of different agencies, but Money A&E specifically, we have a lived experience team who have been there understand, and they'll help you navigate that dark place. They will show you that there is light at the end of the tunnel and help you through that. So anyone who's going through debt or facing those sorts of issues, that's the advice that I would give them. Reach out for support for agencies, and Money A&E are there. They've been through it as well, and they'll be able to give you that support you need. In terms of institutions and ways that we can actually resolve this on a much bigger level, we've spoken about some of the structural issues that are there. I think you need to put lived experience at the core. We've both spoken about how important that is. At Money A&E and also an organisation called Rooted Finance, we're both looking at a variety of different strategies and ways to deal with some of these structural problems. And we're working with government and political stakeholders. We're working with the finance industry as well. And most importantly, we're talking to people with lived experience. We've got a lived experience steering committee who are at the heart of this, telling us what the issues are. If you've got specific stories, we want you to come forward. Get in touch with Money A&E. You can find us on Google, and you just send us an email at our info at, or Karina, who's in our team. And we want to bring you guys into the fold to help us talk to these decision makers so that we can really try and do something in the long term about these issues. So that's what I would say, and what I can do. I can try and say from what we're trying to do individually, but they are massive things. But I think those steps of reaching out essentially on both, so that you can get support to help you with them, is going to be the key thing. So reach out to Money A&E, check us out, get in touch, and we'll be able to help you individually. Or if you want to get involved in bigger stuff and you want to talk to decision makers, and you want to kind of be involved in that process, also reach out to us and we'll get you involved in that way as well.
Thank you, Jerry. And finally, Helen Barnard.
So I'd really echo both of those. So I think, for individuals, so one of the things that we find at food banks is that people put off reaching out for help for a really long time. I think because, as Jerry said, there is often a sense of shame that people don't want to feel that they can't support themselves and their family. And also what we find, one of the worrying things is it feels like kind of really severe hardship is being normalized. So we did some research with people who are going hungry but not reaching out for support to find out why. And the biggest thing they said was, I'm sure there's other people worse off than me. I'm not sure my situation is bad enough to really justify me asking for help. And you can, from the outside, you can look at their situation and they really do. So we have, we have a lot of trustful food banks around the country. You can find them on our website. Lots of people who are volunteers in those food banks have been through it themselves and do reach out. And it's not just about food, is it? It's not just being given an emergency food parcel. It's going somewhere where you'll get a cup of tea, you'll sit with somebody will just listen to you, be a listening ear, and then also be able to connect people to advice, to money advice, to housing and so on. So absolutely, if you're struggling, you are not alone, and there are so many people out there who want to help. I think for decision makers, so I absolutely agree with you've got to have people with direct experience in the room. The other thing I would say is there is no route to dealing with severe poverty and hunger without reforming social security. We have got to reform social security so it actually covers the cost of essentials. And this autumn, the main thing we're saying to government to do is lift the 2-child limit, because we are seeing more and more families with children. And actually, young children have some of the highest risks of being in a family that's food insecure. And that's not right. Children should not be starting their lives in that situation. So if you want to campaign, join us on calling on the government to lift that 2-child limit, because that will give children just a fair start in life.
Thank you, Helen, and no doubt thank you, Jerry. I'm deeply, deeply grateful to you both for sharing your insights and no doubt giving me your time. My hope is that today's conversation will help flesh out the challenges facing Black communities, but also the solution we need to fight for. Join me next time on Debt Talk, when we will be talking about or tackling the issue of insecure housing, which is as prevalent, as important as the subject that we've talked about. Thank you so much.